And joining us now, Martin Chulov, Middle East correspondent for The Guardian newspaper. Thanks for being with us here on France 24. I mean, the first question, you're in Beirut. Just how much is the fall of Yabroud being felt where you are?
Well, it's certainly being celebrated by the Hezbollah communities here. Yesterday, when news broke that Yabroud had fallen, there were dozens, if not hundreds of cars driving around central Beirut on the highway south, waving Hezbollah flags. There were chocolates being handed out at lights in the Hezbollah area called Dahia. And it certainly is a festive mood, a sense of accomplishment, if you like, for the Hezbollah and its supporters. They do believe that they have severed a vital supply line. They do believe also that they have bolstered the Syrian military in its stated goal of securing a great swathe of land from Damascus through this Yabroud area, the Kalamun Mountains, down past Homs, Hama, and to the two port cities of Latakia and Tartus. That is a contiguous strip of land which makes up the heartland of Syria, and it's something that the regime, the Syrian regime, now effectively has control over.
And what does it mean for Hezbollah going forth inside of Lebanon?
Well, there's certainly been a blowback, as your correspondent said, against Hezbollah over the last year, in particular since Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader's speech in May last year when he fully disclosed Hezbollah's role in Syria, in quite a belligerent tone too. That didn't play well right around the region, but certainly amongst the Sunnis of Lebanon, it played particularly poorly. They are of the view that Hezbollah, a Shia militia, is taking the fight to them. There are increasing sectarian overtones, not just in Syria, but also in Lebanon as well. And it does seem that this Hezbollah-led victory in Yabroud will not go unanswered in this country, and we are expecting some kind of an uptick in violence, whether that be car bombs or anything else like that we've seen in recent months.
This taking back of Yabroud, it's certainly part of a trend we've seen, Martin. There is this sense that Assad has the momentum right now.
I think that's an accurate assessment. It's not the stalemate in Syria that it was 6 months ago. And that is largely due, not so much to the Syrian army, which is battle fatigued. It's been fighting for 3 years now. When it was fighting more or less by itself, it wasn't advancing. However, Hezbollah are front and centre at the key battle zones in the country. So too is a very large Iraqi Shia militia called Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. There are around 15,000 of them. The Alawites, who are organised into the National Defence Front, along with some loyalist Sunnis, are also very active. So there is much more organisation in the battlefield in the key parts of the country, whether it be Yabroud in the Kalamun Mountains, parts of Damascus, or specifically Aleppo in the far north. The regime is inching forwards. The opposition is consumed by fratricidal fighting at the moment, and it doesn't seem as though it's posing a coherent threat to the Syrian government.
And you wrote a piece a couple of days ago in The Guardian where you said that the new recruits to this conflict, well, they're coming from Iraq and from Lebanon.
Well, that's certainly the case in the last year or so. The Iraqi Shia militia that I mentioned is playing a very significant role in reinforcing the regime. It's certainly at the vanguard of many of its attacks. It's being recruited very openly in Baghdad and in Najaf. I was there a week or two ago, and the graveyard in Najaf, this particular militia has bought a very large plot, and we counted at least 550 bodies there, and that's just in the last year alone. Hezbollah have played an equally significant role in Lebanon, crossing the border into the Kalamun Mountains and around Damascus. They did lead the attack on Yabroud, as I said, and they have been providing very significant tactical advice and input elsewhere around the country. And when you look at the state of play in Syria now, a predominantly Sunni opposition up against a Shia-led regime, there are undeniably sectarian overtones there that really do have some potential to spread over elsewhere into the region.
And of course, we can add perhaps to the mix, Martin, the fight, as you mentioned, the fight that's going on between these Sunni hardline militias, but we can add to that as well Saudi Arabia's changing policy, perhaps, telling its nationals to return home and branding certain opposition movements inside of Syria as terrorist groups.
I think all of those who have been invested in the military success of the Syrian opposition have had reason to pause for thought in the last 6 to 9 months in particular. During that period, in the north of the country, the al-Qaeda groups, especially the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, a largely Iraqi-based militia with a significant contribution of foreign fighters, have held sway in some key areas. That has contaminated the opposition cause significantly, no doubt about that. It has also stopped their momentum on the battlefield. They've attempted to impose a very strict interpretation of Islamic law in parts of the country that they control, and this has had nothing to do with the original values of the revolution as stated by the backers, in particular Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey. So attention has turned to fighting these guys. That has stopped the momentum for the opposition. I think the Saudis, along with the other key backers, have realised the existential threat that they pose. And they have moved against them. At the same time, they are trying to rearm and reorganise those who more or less are staying consistent to the original goals, and that is ousting Bashar al-Assad and replacing his rule with a democratic, pluralistic form of governance.
One final question for you, Martin. I'm staggered by the numbers of people who are going off to fight in Syria. We're talking about thousands of people. It seems as though a lot of people on both sides of the border, be it in Syria or Lebanon, seem to have a stomach for a fight.
It's a very good issue, and it's an important issue. I think extremists on both sides are using an interpretation of theology to actually send them to Syria. The fundamentalist Sunnis do believe that this is a preordained battle. So do fundamentalist Shias, and that's what I mean about this taking on a very significant sectarian perspective. I mean, I must make the point that not all protagonists stick to these hadiths or fatwas or teachings, but many do, and they are the groups at the pointy end of this, and this does have a significant potential to spread outside of Syria's borders. At face value, if you look at it now, it is being fought along a Sunni-Shia fault line. There are also the other geopolitical divides in the region, the Persians and the Arabs, and to some extent, the Soviets and the Americans. I mean, that orbit is hovering over it as well. So, you know, these are ancient rivalries. These are long, unsettled scores, and these are playing out in real time, and they are taking a very significant toll on finding any sort of a meaningful solution to this crisis, which last week entered its 4th year.
Entered its 4th year with nearly half the population displaced. Martin Chulov, many, many thanks for joining us there from Beirut.
You're welcome.